had my agency for a while, and we had, quite a few clients. We thought a lot of things that turned out to be not as true as we thought. And basically what happened is I was finding myself just at total burnout. I was working Christmas, I was working Thanksgiving, I was missing birthdays. Everything was an emergency all the time. I didn't have enough time to to think straight or to sleep. At one point, I was sitting there on Thanksgiving Day, missing Thanksgiving lunch again, putting out fires and responding to clients. That was kind of a turning point for me.
Cool. We're recording. Karen, I love chatting with you. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Right on. So did an intro on you, but just quickly tell us who you are, what you do.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm Karen Sahetya. I'm founder of Brand Central Marketing. So we are a lead generation agency, primarily using Facebook ads as a vehicle, but basically we work on behalf of coaches and online course creators and local businesses and get them more leads and more revenue into their businesses, taking someone from not knowing who your business is all the way to throwing money at your face. And then in addition to that, I coach agency owners, which is something I'm really, really passionate about, and just helping agency owners overcome some of the things that I've had to overcome in the past.
Which I know a little bit of your story that's, kind of often told within our community, but I'm so curious on like how people end up to being where they're at. Because in my mind, I see you as, a coach, a friend, a mentor. I'm like, well, Karen's just brilliant and she just knows what she's doing. But I got to imagine there's a lot more going on than what I've seen as like this version of Karen. So where were you at before you were coaching in the Cat Howl community and some of the other coaching spaces that you're in?
Yeah, it was exactly where the people I now coach are. So basically I had my agency for a while, and we had, quite a few clients. We thought that we were getting paid what we were supposed to get paid, and thought we were getting the results that we needed to be getting them. And we thought we kind of knew what we were doing. We thought a lot of things that turned out to be not as true as we thought. And basically what happened is I was finding myself just at total burnout. I was working Christmas, I was working Thanksgiving, I was missing birthdays. Everything was an emergency all the time. I didn't have enough revenue to really hire the team that I wanted to hire. I didn't have enough time to to think straight or to sleep. And at one point, I think the story that you're kind of talking about is that at one point I was sitting there on Thanksgiving Day, missing Thanksgiving lunch again, putting out fires and responding to clients. And that's when I tripped up on Kat and her webinar, and had no idea who she was. But she became my first mentor in this space, and that was kind of a turning point for me.
Right on. And that's kind of like the legendary story of Karen. But at that point, you had already been doing marketing within your own agency, and you had worked for some really big brands, before starting out on your own. So I don't know, maybe usually I don't like go far back, but let's keep going back, and then we're going to go back.
Let's go back in time. Yeah. And that's not even something that I really even spent a lot of time talking about, but it was such an important foundational piece of the journey for me. So my background is in consumer products, licensed consumer products to be specific. So I was working at a well-known apparel manufacturing company, and my job was basically to liaison with movie studios like Marvel and Disney and Warner Brothers, and also big box retailers like Target and Walmart and JCPenney, all these retailers, and basically get licensed product on the floor so little kids could buy Spider-Man, whatever, right? So that was where I started. And the reason it was so important is because that corporate background gave me a look into the processes that make companies successful. It also really helped me understand marketing as a much bigger picture than, a Facebook ads manager dashboard. So that's kind of where it all started. And then, like you said, yes, I went out on my own. I continued in consumer products, in licensing, but for my own agency. And that eventually morphed into focusing on the digital aspect of marketing.
I gotcha. So what was that like? And kind of what prompted where you were at working with these big brands and companies to being like, I'm going to step away from this and launch something of my own?
No, for me, it was a really fortunate conspiring of the universe, if you will. So the company underwent some major changes at the top, and there were changes in leadership, and so there were, mass layoffs and changes, and so I was a part of that, and it was like a lot of people I think look at that day in their lives as a sense of panic and doom and gloom, and for me, it was a sense of opportunity and a little bit of relief because I'm super loyal to the track that I pick. And so I think I was in a sense I was in a position where I don't know if I would have eventually left the nest, but I don't know how much longer it would have taken me to really explore the entrepreneurial spirit I had. And so that kind of happened for me. And um, I love what I did though. So it was the opportunity to take it and do it across so many more brands and products.
Interesting. So, I mean, I feel like it's the common theme with talking with business owners, like they always like kind of knew it. So, I mean, it sounded like even when you were there, you're like, I need to get out there. And again, it's that spirit that you had for it. So that as being a catalyst, that layoff and that whole major change, you're like, cool, well now I'm going to do it. It's fascinating. And I don't know, I'm curious, like so it's almost like you're there and you're going full steam ahead. And what was those first years like, or year, or even months when you're like, well, I have no job and now I'm solely responsible for making money to pay my bills?
I never really had that thought process. I was just so excited. It was, I saw it coming. So in fairness, I saw the direction of the company. I saw what was kind of coming. I was prepared to kind of go my own way. And so I think it was literally the next day that I filed paperwork and officially launched the LLC. It was literally the next day. By I think the next week, I was already on a plane across the country meeting with movie studios again, and fostering those relationships. And so there was no real in between. I launched right into it because I had a lot of the relationships. I knew what I wanted to do. I met with mentors at the time and just kind of ran my ideas by them to make sure I was somewhat sane. And we didn't have a lot of clients, but I do remember with a little bit of time that we did have, kind of looking to my partner and saying, we could go get pedicures in the middle of the day today if you want, because, why not? And instead of kind of worrying about where the next client was coming from and the next revenue and how am I going to pay bills, it was more like, I know that this time right now, this period, this phase is so limited and I need to enjoy it and experience it, because not too long from now, I knew that I wouldn't have that same luxury of just, popping out in the middle of the day.
Wait, and that was your thought from the beginning?
It really was. I don't know how weird that is or not weird that is, but it didn't, there wasn't really a lot of, and I don't know if it's kind of just comes back to mindset, but for me, I'm fortunate that I don't feel like I've really ever had to work at having an abundant mindset. I have had mentors, like Kat's one of them, who showed me even more about abundance and like understanding an even different dimension of abundance. But I've always been the kind of person that just feels like there's opportunity all around us. And the biggest challenge is figuring out which one to take, because you can't have them all at the same time.
No, because I would have thought, and at least, I mean, so everyone's experience is different. Like for me, when I'm starting out, like I've kind of started over twice of like in the business world. And both times it's been like, I'm working crazy hard now so that in the future, whether that's a year or 2 years or whatever, I can take off anytime I want. And that has happened. But it was interesting. You said almost like the opposite. You're like, oh, this is early on. I'm gonna pop out when I want to, and maybe your thought was, I'm gonna become so busy because my business is so amazing that I'll have less.
I don't know that I would have phrased it exactly like that, but it was more that. So the thing with what I used to do with licensing is that it's a longer end game. And so it is fast paced, but in a different way. And so we had a couple of clients, and these are high retainer clients, But we can only move so fast with them, right? Because we're waiting on product development, we're waiting on a contract to come through, and so we had time available to us, and we could only manage so much at a time. So we just had the luxury of time at that point in time. And then yes, we got super busy, couldn't see straight, and then I had to work back toward like what you're saying, where I had to work back to being able to have a better life balance.
Uh-huh. That's so fascinating. I mean, and that speaks to like, if you know your business and have patience, which is for me much of a learned skill, because it's like I get that anxiety if I'm not doing something. I'm like, well, if I'm not doing something, I could be doing something that's productive, and having to manage that and being like, no, I've put everything out. Now I got to wait for it to come back in, and not necessarily even on like a manifestation thing, putting out to the universe. I've sent those emails. I've done networking or whatever it was to build the business in the first place. And it's like, okay, now I can take off. And the second time around, I was much better at that, not just doing things to stay busy, for the sake of being busy. But
Right.
where do you think, because I mean, it's your mindset is like, it's like top tier. And you're the type of person that like, from me looking at, seeing you coach, like nothing, you're not rattled. You're always just like calm and chill. I'm sure that you're not always that way all the time, but you do a great job of inspiring confidence in hundreds and hundreds of people. But I find it interesting, like that you said that you kind of always had that mindset. Like how did you cultivate that, develop that? Did you always kind of have like that positive outlook of abundance on life, like you had said, or I don't know, where do you think that came from, or how did you get there?
Yeah, well, to be clear, I mean, there's things absolutely that rattle me, and mindset is something I'm always working on as well. Like I don't know that anyone fully has it figured out, where they just don't need to work on mindset. So I don't ever want to set that expectation to someone else that like any one person has it all figured out. But I have to credit my parents for that feeling of abundance and resourcefulness, because I think at the root of my feeling of abundance is the idea that I'm resourceful. I have the skills I need, I have the knowledge I need. Yes, I'm always seeking more knowledge, more skills, things like that. But trusting yourself, I think it all comes back to just trusting yourself, that you know how to solve problems, you know how to stand up for yourself, you know how to be there for yourself and to provide for yourself. And that might look different from month to month, year to year, business to business, right? But I think that just started when I was really young, and my parents, my mother in particular, raising me to be a problem solver and kind of forcing me to be resourceful.
That's amazing. I mean, it's an amazing thing to have. And I mean, yeah, you're always cultivating, kind of maintaining it because you could lose it. I mean, protect your mindset, as you say, but
absolutely.
So that I'm piecing these together. I'm like, you've got Karen growing up, working at this place, immediately almost seamless transition into where you're at. How long ago was that you first started of your own agency?
2012.
Okay. So in the digital world, you've been around for ages.
Yeah, I would say though, in the digital world, even though I was doing digital pretty quickly after going out on my own, because again, it was licensed consumer products. And what happened is people started saying, they kind of started thinking marketing is marketing. They don't really know the difference. And they started asking for all these other digital aspects of marketing that, while I technically kind of could do pieces of, it wasn't what I'd set out to do. So eventually the demand just became overwhelming, pivoted toward that, but realized pretty quickly that I was okay at it, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And that was in 2016 when I met Kat, and really found out how much I didn't know. And that was revolutionary for me.
Do you still do any of that licensing stuff?
No, I don't. None of it. I have people reach out every now and then and just, look for some consultation. And it's a world that I really, really enjoy, and I miss certain aspects of it, but no.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, why do you think you've kind of done that full transition?
It's a matter of focus. Where
Yeah.
can I best show up, serve, and impact people? And if I split my focus in too many different directions, and there's not a lot of overlap in that world and what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
um, and one of my challenges with that was scaling, and that was why pivoting was so attractive to me. And when I look back at that, I wonder if I knew then what I know now, would I have been able to scale it more successfully without burnout? Maybe, but it's just it's a different game.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely can't be everything to everybody. And even like, I don't know, stuff that's like in the same world, but it's also not, it sucks your energy, and you can't, like, the feeling of half-assing something like is real. It's not just like, well, you find out later from the quality of the work, you're like, I literally cannot put my full effort into it. And it sucks. And that's where you're like, okay, I'm going to say no to this because I know I can't, do my best. And stuff that might be out of line with your offerings, even like your core values, I found out to be
Exactly.
insanely true. I mean, and like, and you're doing a ton of coaching. I feel like now more than ever, you're doing, from what I know, twice a week calls in this coaching group, the Cat Howl group, maybe even a third call with it, and then you've got your own coaching group. I mean, is that something you're like, I'll keep coaching much more and run this business because you're just passionate about both things?
Yeah, it's a different feeling. It never gets old to crack a client's funnel and to start getting the results and to have, a team and be able to mentor and invest back into a team. Um, but I am insanely passionate about helping agency owners because I went through that and I understand it. And it's, yeah, it's just something I really enjoy. And I think, yeah, I'm doing about four calls a week in one community. I'm doing, another couple, for the yoga community, in particular. But yeah, I think I see myself coaching for a long time. It's just, it almost feels like my moral obligation to give back because I've had really great mentors pour into me and help me change my life.
Yeah. You're like, the expression that gets tossed around. I love rap music, and people always say, oh, this is your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. And I'm
Right.
trying to, I'm like, you're my favorite agency's favorite, or you're the favorite agency's favorite agency coach or something, like, the kind of the woman behind the scenes that maybe not everyone knows about, but everyone who is like, yeah, like Karen's the shit. Like, looking to you for all kinds of stuff, because you are a great coach. I mean, I know personally, um, just, even if it's not something like directly, I'm like overhearing stuff you're saying to other people. I'm like, yeah, like that's solid. One thing, I've told you this before, like, I don't even know where you were saying it, but like, protect your mindset. That, there was a time when my mindset was bouncing around, and just that short sentence, it gave me permission to protect myself, to look for myself. I always had a problem with being way too concerned with what other people thought of me, or what I thought people's reactions, would to me would be. So I don't know, your stuff's just very impactful. What do you do, I mean, to maintain that? I mean, I'm into mindset routines and kind
Yeah.
of like what people's daily habits and routines are. I mean, what do you tend to do to just maintain your solid state?
Yeah, I don't have a magic routine. And I don't think that anyone's one routine necessarily is the right routine for someone else. And so I encourage people to find their own, like what works for them. Because for me, I think the value of meditation is really important. Meditation is overwhelming and intimidating to some people. And so then they just don't try it. And I think it's important to think, well, hey, going to take a walk every day, making sure you get movement, that's a form of meditation. If you're a musician, if you play piano, guitar, sing, whatever, those are different ways of attaining meditation. But I do think that there's, that kind of me time, that thoughtful time to reflect, however you do it, is important. For me, that's movement. So if I don't get movement in, if I'm not walking or moving or getting outside, then I see it take its toll on me. So that, and I think when we try to specialize in something and we want to become an expert in that thing, we spend all our time and attention on that thing, and we forget to allow ourselves to study or understand or explore other aspects of our personality and lives. And I think when you give yourself the permission to be creative and explore elsewhere, it actually completely enhances the thing you're trying to do. So those are just a couple of things that I try to remember for myself.
I love that. And I think that is true where, your brain and body don't know like, oh, well, I'm going to, be in this way, in hobbies or with friends or whatever, but I can't take that over. It's almost like everything is a practice for life and kind of opening that up. And so, yeah, just getting, it's a quote of like, if you can master one thing, you can master all things. And like what you were saying of like, give yourself permission to explore, some hobby that opens up your brain and ability to explore new challenges and solutions to stuff in business.
Yeah, and as well as it gives you the opportunity potentially, depending on what you're exploring, to meet new people with new ways of thinking that help adjust your perspective a little bit. And to that point, I think who you surround yourself with is so key to your mindset. You like in getting, sometimes that's your peer group, sometimes it's coaching and mentorship that you get for yourself, but those things are important too.
Yeah, it's because it's less about, I mean, the skills are there, right? So I mean, the skills can be acquired. I mean, you don't even need to pay for
Right.
anything to anyone. You can learn everything on your own, and of course, then it turns into, well, what's the speed in which
Hmm.
you do that, the efficiency. But I mean, the, I think I'm an example. There's a lot of other examples of people who like are like, no, the biggest change for me was not that I learned this one extra secret skill to enhance my ability. It was, no, what changed was my confidence in those abilities that I had for a while, and the outlook and that presence of I can do this, and the confidence that you can, um, and then getting rid of that voice saying, but what if you can't? What if you can't deliver on that? And when you get that mindset, that kind of goes away, because that it's nothing is 100%.
Right.
And I should revise that. Not everything is 100%, because if you speak in an absolute saying there are no absolutes, it's kind of
Right.
contradictory. But we all seek that certainty, you know. But once you can get past it, like, no, well, I am also confident that if it goes wrong, I know how to then fix it. Because in the end,
Exactly.
most people aren't expecting perfection from you. They may say that they want it. I want these ads to work 100% of the time. But what they really want is the confidence and comfort. Like, if something goes wrong, you're going to be there for them.
Right. Exactly. So true.
Yeah, man. So you work with a lot of coaches, and I mean, I kind of want to stick on the mindset theme. I mean, does that come up with like your coaches and clients that you're working with directly? Because we've talked about the agency owners, literally hundreds of agency owners that you've helped, but now like your own clients, like, do you find that you're guiding them not just in business strategy and creating new offerings and cultivating an audience, but you're also coaching them in mindset and approach to, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I found myself doing that a lot more earlier on in the business, where it was very difficult to separate the mindset aspect from the Facebook ads aspect or even their own coaching aspect. It all started to kind of get muddled in together. And while I didn't mind doing that necessarily, and there was a benefit to it, it became something I eventually decided that I didn't want to combine and to blend. And my ideal client is doing the work on their own. Like, they are already at a level where they've understood that mindset is important. They're already protecting it. They work on it. They may have other coaches for it. Um, and so that's usually the ideal client. And the reason for that is in part because I'm not always the single only person that they're in contact with. And to have our team to all have to be as experts and mindset experts, and like, there becomes a lack of focus. And what I want a client to come to me for is results, really really clear results. And for us to be able to focus purely on that, we need them to kind of do their part, because it is a partnership. They need to do their part and make sure they're protecting their mindset.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's almost it's like they're in your niche or avatar. It's like, well, if you're already doing mindset work, cool, we can work very well together. You're not going to be coaching them on that because they maybe are doing it themselves or have other people, but then you can just say a very, hey, just give them a couple sentences and they're going to understand you because they know like, okay, yeah, Karen gets the mindset aspect of
Yeah, we kind of
what we're doing.
speak the same language for sure. And you sort of uncover some of these things and where someone is in their mindset pretty quickly in the sales process. So that kind of helps us with client criteria and understanding who would be a good fit and who may not be.
Yeah. Which, I mean, identifying clients is huge. I mean, it's almost like you connect on the mindset first, and then, okay, if we connect on that, then we can then serve you, because if you don't, I mean, I think anyone that's ever worked with a client or even a customer, like I'm thinking of an example that's completely different from the service industry. Like someone goes into a craft brewery. I used to bartend at a craft cidery. It was a lot of fun. There'd be people who come in who were of the mindset of like, I know that this is locally made. I know that this is going to be $7 per pint, which for Richmond is a little bit more expensive than what you might be used to. But I know this is like higher quality than something mass produced, because people get it. Their mindset's already in line. Then you get people coming in and being like, what do you have that tastes like beer? I like drinking Bud Light. It's like, shit, man, I don't know. I mean, I would point out like the lightest thing, but those people aren't going to be repeat customers, or those types are going to take far more of my time and effort because they're just not of the mindset, come in. And likewise on the service side, do you want someone who like doesn't believe in investing themselves, which also means investing in your business? Do they, think everything should be 100% working, which is the most unrealistic expectation. The business owners still think like, I'm going to do this initiative. There's going to be zero risk to it. I'm going to make double, triple my money by next month. It's like, where the fuck did you go to business school?
Well, I think the bottom line is, we'd like to oversimplify all of it, is that we want it to end well for the person we're working with. And for it to end well, there are going to be ups and downs, but we see a direct correlation with mindset. And it doesn't mean nobody's mindset isn't going to take a hit. They might have to kind of bring themselves back up. But if you were to plot like 1 through 10, where's my mindset today? And say, okay, today's a 3, today's a 7, today's an 8, whatever. Just plot it over time, and also throw in your revenue numbers over that same time. You will 100% see a correlation. It just happens. It's happened in my own business over and over again. I've seen it happen in hundreds of other people's businesses. And so if like Facebook ads lead generation is just a fraction of what needs to happen to make a business successful. And if we see that we're going to be fighting against mindset the entire time, we know we're not going to be able to be as successful as we want to be with them. So that's really where it comes from. It's just, even if they're ready to throw money at our faces, we don't want it if we can't get them where they want to go.
Yeah. Which it almost, I mean, it's like an obligation you have for somebody's time and money. We're like, I could take that money and I could give you my best effort, but if you already know that the aspects of what makes a business work don't align up, maybe they don't have a proven offer, maybe their mindset isn't right, and maybe it's just not a good fit. You're like, it's an odd thing that I've discovered, like going from a product-based industry of my last business, where I'm like, you're paying me $3, I'm giving you this popsicle. It's a done deal. You know what you're getting, versus, hey, I'm going to pay you for your time and expertise. That hopefully also makes me money. And I don't know, just like relationship with money and how it works and like value you give. Like, I think if you're not like scamming people, like there are dorks and losers who scam folks. It sucks, especially in our industry. But if you feel an obligation, like I mean, I could easily take this money and do the work you need, but I know that it's not going to work, so I'm going to like say no to that. It's a tough place to be in.
It gets easier and easier, because when you accidentally take on one of those and realize the avalanche of issues it causes, not just for you, your own agency, but also for them, it's just not worth it. And so we definitely unsell more than we sell, and that is, for us, it's just as big a win to unsell who would have been the wrong person than it is to sell, as it is to sell the right person.
Yeah. And I feel if anyone that knows you and what you do as well as I do, if we were like talking, I'd be like, please, Karen, work with me. Like, I'm begging you. Because if there's people who are like, nah, I don't want you guys, I'm like, do you know who Karen is? Do you know how big of a deal she is? But no, that makes sense. I'm curious, like, what's like, other than just like of being of a similar mindset, and you could call that values, whatever your core values are. I mean, what are some other like check boxes that you typically have for clients to be able to work with you?
So we're really analytics driven, data driven, and for us, the numbers they just simply have to work. You might be a great guy or girl or a great fit. We might have a blast working together, but if your offer just from a number standpoint, when you put in the conversion percentages in there, you put the click-through rates in there, you put all the information in, and you go, wait, there's no way this is going to be profitable. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of you putting a ton of ad spend in and maybe even selling a lot, but still losing money along the way. And so the offer has to be right. We already talked about mindset has to be right. You have to, have the system in place to support it. And granted, once we do get the floodgates on and you've got sales or leads coming your way, things are going to start to break. You're going to have to scale. You're going to have to fix things along the way. But we do want to make sure that people are ready for that, have thought about that. Can they scale? Do they even want to scale? Is that what they want in their lives? Or they just kind of want to get to a certain place and coast there? And that's perfectly fine. I think it's just important for them to know that.
Yeah. And I love too that you brought that up, because as much as we've already talked about mindset, I mean, I think this is why the community that we're in, we get along well. It's like, yeah, we're thinking like, oh, in the clouds, whatever crazy shit that people might be thinking, but it's also very grounded into the realities of what makes a business and how are you going to help it. And I mean, yeah, you guys are like number data driven, like to a T, like, how to analyze it and how to see, like, does this make sense? Like, if you're selling this, how do you, what's the customer acquisition? Does that make sense? You're going to lose money. Well, then what's your next thing? And all that. So it's cool having, that balance of it is key for it. But the mindset is huge. Like, cause again, if I was like the most data person, but I didn't believe in it, I think I couldn't sell it. People pick up that vibe, when you're talking to clients.
Absolutely. Well, and so like speaking of data, all the hundreds and hundreds of agency owners that have gone through the program coaching, the system is the same. The system works. The data proves it. The numbers prove it. I've seen it work over and over and over and over again. The only time I see it really kind of not work is if sometimes people don't believe it's going to work, or they don't fully implement because they're really skeptical. But if the mindset is really struggling, the system doesn't work, because the system itself doesn't have an opinion about you. It's not selecting Paul, but nobody else, So I think, that's just another place where I've seen kind of from the outside the role that mindset plays. And the same person who was struggling, when they do get their mindset in check, can just take off and skyrocket. And it's the coolest thing to see happen.
Yeah. I know I've been there. And one of my worst mindsets that I've been overcome is like, I will equally think, oh, this is going to work because I'm doing it. But also it's like, oh, this isn't working. I must suck. It must work for everyone else but me. How do I get to that first one more often?
Yeah, I think it's you have to separate yourself. It's detaching yourself. And I used to think detachment was such a bad word, because I really care. And the idea of detachment was like, oh, I don't care. But detaching your personal self from your clients, from ads manager, from everything that you're doing, because otherwise you end up riding this crazy ride of, oh, I suck. Oh, I'm great. I suck. I'm great.
Yeah. I've been there for sure. And I feel like I'm in a place where I have gotten that detachment. It's pretty stellar. You cannot unring that bell.
Right.
I mean, you can if you let your mindset go, and maybe like in a year from now, if I just am, picking up bad habits, like drinking all the time, eating mac and cheese every day, I'm going to lose my health, lose my mindset. But oh my God, I totally agree. I had a question and then it just like slipped my mind until we went that. But I mean, what have you found like as just challenges have you gone through? I mean, because you've had that mindset. So what, I mean, are there times or moments where you're just like in doubt or just in like fear? Maybe it was, when Corona hit and just uncertain, or just any type of your evolution within business where you're like, ah, fuck, like this is like a bad time for me.
100%. I mean, it happens, and having a good mindset doesn't mean that these things won't happen to you. But it just means that you trust yourself to get through it and to figure it out. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one that has affected me a lot over the years has been when we have changes with team, for example, and you have shifts, sometimes even changes with clients, people that you've been working with for a long time, and everything's amicable and good, but you just have to, you move into a different phase, and maybe they move on, or maybe you have to move on because you've changed your focus in the business. But those kinds of changes for me personally have been tough to let go of things, or tough to kind of, you have to start reimagining what things look like. And those, yeah, I would say those have been the tough things for me is, team and clients, like those major shifts with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, because you have a lot invested in both sides,
right?
Both, your business is kind of riding on their ability to do good work. You probably invested in both client and team personally on just guidance, extra time, attention on your end. And then if something goes away, it's almost like, so yeah, it's a weird.
Yeah.
Weird
And
feeling.
I think, like we talked about detachment a second ago, and I think the reason those things are tough is because there's not that complete detachment. There is emotion involved. You've been invested in your client success for so long. You talk to them all the time. They become an extension of your family, kind of. And same thing with your team. And so that's where the emotional aspect of things come in. But with both, like my desire for everybody is, I just want to leave everybody better than I found them. And so with clients, I'm happy for them, hopefully, to move on, to graduate, to grow even further if that's what's happening. And for team members, like, we don't ever have a problem really with people leaving. There've been so many people that I've helped place because they were ready to try a new or different challenge. Or we're very supportive, even if that means we're a stepping stone to their next adventure. I want everybody to reach their full potential.
Yeah. That expression that's often quoted, probably more in movies and TV. I don't know how much anyone says it daily, but like, and it's just business. It's not personal. I don't know. Maybe they say that in the corporate world.
Right.
That ain't true. Like, dude, I take my business very personally.
And you should. Like, that doesn't mean you attach your self-worth to your revenue. But
yeah.
If you don't care about what you're doing, if you don't care about the audience you're serving, then I don't know. It just, yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you can't just take the emotion out of it. Like
right.
It's always going to be there, and then to deny that is a recipe for massive frustration and confusion. And
true. I just think it's important to remember that business being personal doesn't have to be the negative side of personal. It can be the positive, supportive, growth-oriented side of personal as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but man, I mean, I think employees can almost get that can be as tough to manage as sometimes like difficult clients. Because, and I'm curious, like, as your team has grown, like, what was that like as, coming from a place of working in this company, starting it small, and now you've got a team, like, just dealing with the challenges of employees where you're, like a new leader, starting out and like, okay, now I've got a team, and it doesn't maybe the relationship between you and your employees and your team isn't how you thought, they act differently. Like, what has been some of the growth there, or learnings, if any?
Yeah, it's the biggest growth or shift is right here in your head again. It's mindset, and it's recognizing that your role has to change. And it's really a really cool transformation where it stops being all about me and even all about the business, and it starts being about, how can I help this other person on my team reach their full potential? How can I help them learn? How can I invest in them? Versus like, what can I get out of this? How much revenue am I making? Like, the goal becomes very, very different. And your day-to-day becomes different, because now they're investing their time, focus, and attention on the client. And it's my job to then support them. So yeah, it's a shift. It's for me, it was a fun shift. I like that. I like that role of kind of mentoring and supporting internally. So yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely makes sense on the coaching side that you're doing. But knowing like, and that being like kind of where you're at now, but I know like sometimes like, you want to do the best for these employees and you're like, I want to help. And then they act in such a way where you're like, are you trying to like fuck me? Are you trying to like, cut my, legs out from under me and just,
Yeah. Yeah.
and where you're like, you're like, whoa, this is just totally flipped. Like, this isn't how you're supposed
Yeah.
to react. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I went through that. I definitely have been through that. And, um, sometimes letting go was undoubtedly the hardest part. And I was chatting with Taylor, who we both know, pretty recently about just the entire concept about letting go and building that trust with your team. And that was really, really difficult for me. But I think what I learned from that was empowering them and putting the processes in place to protect them and to help them win, was really the answer. But no, I was not super smooth about it. I had a really hard time letting go, trusting, not being the one with my hands and everything, doing everything, kind of like that mentality of, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yeah.
You have to stop believing lies like that, because that's not entirely true. Like when you hire the right people, you wake up one day and you're like, whoa, they're doing that better than I could have ever done that. That's
Yeah.
amazing, because that's their focus.
Yeah, and often they might just do it differently than how you would have, and I think the blind spot that a lot of leaders have is they make probably more mistakes than anybody in the company. Like by the nature of almost like being an entrepreneur, you're gonna shoot first, ask questions later, but you're blind to your mistakes because as you make a mistake, you're always self-correcting.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see employees make a mistake in your mind, you're thinking, oh well, they don't know any better, they're doing a bad job. Like no, like allow them
So
that space to correct,
yeah, that's such a great point. That the idea that we're always self-correcting and we give ourselves a little bit of that grace, or we're comfortable being mad at ourselves because that drives us to do better the next time, but we're not really applying that to our team. So that's a really good point. I do think that, if you're doing your hiring process properly, you do have to also come to a point to realize that most people want to do a good job. They are doing their best. They're open. Their heads and their hearts are in the right place. And so the moment you start assuming that people are trying to screw you all the time, and not trusting them, and then not empowering them, and then testing them to see if you can get them to fail, like I hear so much of that distrust with people and their teams. And I don't see how anyone can succeed in that environment.
Yeah, I got lucky. Like I went through a lot of those challenges. I was a teacher for 2 years and like crashed and burned my first year. Second year, I was light years ahead and did amazing, had amazing students, but also because I changed too. It's not like I have 150 other students who all happen to be much better than the first group. But yeah, it's tough to think about of like, well, your role as the authority, as the leader, and then seeing seeing it manifest differently than maybe you had, and not being the one that creates bad employees, because you can take an A+ player in your team and turn them bad. I saw
Oh yeah.
A+ honors students, straight A's, who never got in trouble, and they got in trouble in my class because I sucked as a leader, as a teacher that first year. I'm like, and that was a wake-up call. I'm like, I got the best students. It was a middle school, and only like the smartest, most driven kids took Spanish because
Mm-hmm.
it was not a requirement. I'm like, I got the best students in the school, and they are perfect angels in every class but mine. Like I must be doing something wrong. And so the exact same thing can happen to your team. I think there's a almost 100% comparison to managing a classroom and managing a team.
Oh, completely.
People do not change. People cannot hide their human nature. But it's, once I realized like, oh, I'm actually creating these things, you stop taking it as personally, and you can have that mix of letting go. but also giving them support and encouragement, and not,
Right.
like you said, like, I'm going to test you to make sure you're, doing some. It's
Right.
easy to have a dialogue of what a leader's supposed to be. And that's if you're listening to external stuff of like, oh, because everything is true. And I mean, I quote Tom Bilyeu. He said you have to be able to have two competing thoughts in your mind. My take, and I learned this kind of from the streets, you have to be able to live with paradoxes, and that like two equal truths in your mind simultaneously. It's the toughest thing to have, but it's actually very effective.
Yeah, and all of this comes back, like if you weren't working on mindset and protecting your mindset, then it's very difficult to have that awareness and that introspection without beating yourself up, because it's not about beating yourself up. It's about understanding the dynamic that's happening and then being open to seeing that maybe you're part of the problem, maybe you could be part of the solution. And the exact same way that, you've kind of taken all these great students and created an environment where they could behave badly, you can create an environment that's so supportive and encouraging and the right kind of environment. And you can watch, mediocre players or students or team members really rise. And that is so rewarding.
I could not agree more. Like, there's you can hire, and I mean, we talked a lot about mindset. I mean, next time we can talk way more on like leadership, because I don't talk leadership and management nearly as much as I talk marketing and mindset. But taking someone who has maybe an average skill level, but is like top personality fit and culture fit, I'll take that person in day of the week. I can teach them the skills. And then when you see their skills rise, I mean, you're like, now I have the perfect employee. Because most people want to have both when they hire. And it's like, you're not going to get that. And then vice versa. This happened to me once in my last business. I hired a college kid who was friends with some of my existing employees. I'm like, man, this kid just doesn't seem to have like any like charisma or like desire to like chat. But I realized like he was just very shy. And I asked one of my managers, like, what do you think of him? Like, he's a good kid. Like, I think we should have him. So he comes on, and like I saw his growth. He turned into like one of our top go-to people. And that is, it's insanely rewarding. You believe in people's ability to do good work and as a place for growth. And it's insanely rewarding when you're in that leadership position.
Yeah. Well, and I think you have to also understand that people are individuals. And so they need something different out of the relationship. Like you can't just place this blanket assumption on everyone, like this is how they work or this is what they need from me. And so I think kind of being aware that people need different types of support, levels of support, like understanding your team in that way, how they need to be communicated to, for example, those are all important elements.
Yeah, because a word that gets misused far more in business is, I guess, well, two, consistency and scale. If you're consistent in how you do it, yeah, you can scale. Like, here, new hire, here's an SOP, here's our onboarding, take it, now you're top employee. Well, that's the only way I can scale, Paul. I can't change it for every employee, Paul. Like, well, you fucking should if you want to get a quality, diverse team, because everyone should get that same process, but everyone's going to need different levels of support with it. And so you got to be able to give that to them.
Yeah. And it's not, I think people just need to not confuse the two. Like you can have rinse and repeat and simplicity so that you can scale, and SOPs and processes, that's all fine. But even for your team, because it's not all on you, but even for your team to have an awareness of how other people on their team communicate and what they need out of that relationship and in their environment, that's important, because it won't always be you as a single touch point for every single person on your team as you grow. And so your whole team has to learn how to communicate with each other in a way that's appropriate.
Yeah, I could go on. The last thing I'll say to wrap this, and then we'll wrap on one more topic, is well, if I do this for you, I got to do it for everybody. Like that kind of fallacy, that's a logical fallacy that is true. It's like, no, like I made an exception for Bill because of their unique situation, and now I'm not making an exception because your situation is totally different. Like a lot of leaders fall into that fallacy of I have to treat everyone identically because of that. Like, well, if I do it for you, I got to do it for everyone else. I find that to be very untrue.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe it's a matter of just making things available and more than one format, if you will. So, for example, if you have someone on your team who is super fact oriented, like they need to see the numbers, the data, they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Then you have that as part of your processes, as part of your meetings. If you have someone on the other hand who, I don't know, is not as detailed, but just needs to understand the big picture and needs the more creative, inspiration, emotional side of things, then making sure that they're kind of pumped up and getting what they need out of that as well. Like, and then there are some things that I think everyone needs, whether we admit it or we don't. And that's things like, those affirmations, those positive affirmations. And a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, think that we don't need them until maybe we get a few, and then we don't get a few, and then we're like, oh, wait, this is actually a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe my team needs this too. And just that alone can be a game changer.
Yeah, especially with like, I think I'm speaking broadly for guys. Like, I think guys have a tough time accepting stuff, and whether it's from one guy to another, like we don't express our emotions to each other that well. And I don't know if it's the same of like, it's like, well, if I'm a woman, I'm a leader, how am I going to talk to this guy? Well, let us do his thing. Guys aren't very emotional. I won't say anything. But I know like one agency I contracted with this summer, very charismatic founder. He's awesome, and I'm learning a ton from him. And within that first couple of weeks, and I think this is just how he is. I don't know if he has like a process for it. Paul, I'm grateful for you. I appreciate it. It's great having you on the team. And I'm like, oh man, like, thank you. Like, it's a nice thing. And whether we, like you said, whether we think we need it or want it or not, because in my mind, I'm like, man, I don't need them to thank me. They're paying me to do work that I enjoy. That's enough. But it goes a long way. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
What completely transition, because we could talk management all freaking day. It's 2021. I don't know, this podcast is probably coming out in the next few weeks, so who knows when folks are listening. And so we're kind of wrapping up January. I'm curious, like, one, what are you excited for, looking forward to in 2021, mixed with any predictions that you might have in the digital world and business, your philosophies on business as a whole, kind of how things are adapting in this new year we're in.
Yeah, wow, that's a big question, but I'll kind of sum it up to say that 2020, I think, was a huge opportunity for a lot of us to take stock of our lives, our businesses, reflect a lot, and decide what's important to us, what's working, what's not working. And so I feel like I took a lot of time to do that in 2020. And so for 2021, I'm excited to really just to simplify, just to do more of what I really, really love, and to not feel like I need to do the things that really weren't producing for me or adding a lot of value, whether that be joy and happiness or revenue, whatever that might be. If it wasn't adding a lot of that, then being okay and letting go of some of those things. So, for me, that means getting to mentor more people this year, coach more people this year, maybe make some tweaks and adjustments with the clients that we serve. But I think there's just, whether it's me or you, Paul, or anyone listening to this, the thing that I want people to know that 2021, the outlook for that is tons of opportunity, which was the same as 2020. You just have to know where to look for it and kind of trust yourself that you have the ability to create value and opportunity.
Which is tough. I mean, if you don't value yourself first, how do you find value other places, which to touch on that mindset. And it's true. A lot of people had a rough year, but a lot of people are reporting like 2020 was the best year ever for business. And then, where that sets them up for in the future of what their end business and personal goals are. Oh, well, now I killed it in 2020. Now I can, buy this dream house or buy my spouse something that I've been always wanting to, that, that kind of success can afford to you. So,
and you may have had the worst year ever in 2020, but if it gave you the opportunity to see what was working and not working, taking that and moving forward, it may be the best thing ever for your 2021.
Yeah, I do believe like everything is in a constant state of like growth, and maybe, well, how do I rephrase it? Like, you're always in a state of renewal. There's like peaks and valleys. So what's great about knowing like, man, that was a bad, month or bad 6 months or year. Well, I'm in a valley. The way of science and how everything works is it can only go up, and especially if you desire that and work towards it, it's like, well, this sucks. but let me get through. And then what's always been true for me, I mean, it's almost like 100% of the time, when I get through that and recognize that like this was not as what I wanted and this is terrible, what comes next is like notches above where I previously was.
Absolutely. And even in a state of, if you will, constant growth, you keep reaching these levels, these plateaus where you realize that what got you to where you are is now broken, doesn't work, those same principles don't apply. And you have to, it's almost like you're completely relearning everything from scratch, because now you're at a new place you haven't been before.
Yeah. And hopefully at that point, I mean, if you're kind of set on where your mindset is in your own personal self with that, some detachment, you can, that process is much more comfortable. It's a very uncomfortable process the first time you do it, because you're questioning, am I good? Like, was all my previous success just like a fluke? Maybe I just got lucky and I'm actually not that good. And what I'm saying are like actual thoughts that I've had in, the last couple of years. But, I think what's tough is when you're still attached to stuff and you try to detach. It's like, I heard this quote, it's like losing an identity and adopting a new one is akin to dying. Your identity is fighting to stay alive, and that's why it's so tough. But
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think one of the things that one of my mentors told me or helped me realize was, every time you feel like you want to quit, it's just because there's a block, there's a thing that you haven't quite learned yet how to navigate. And if you can just break through that thing, it's amazing how quickly that, desire to just quit or think that you can't do it goes away. And you get to skyrocket pretty fast to the next level where you're like, I'm stuck again. Maybe this isn't right for me. Maybe I want to quit. So be aware of what that feeling might really be.
did you ever feel like you wanted to quit? Like when you started the business?
I think there have definitely been times. Here's how it kind of manifests in me. There have been times where I thought that I was just over it, that I was just bored with it. And the way it shows up for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, is in the form of a new opportunity. Because you're like, oh, that's really attractive. There's a new opportunity. And this is how it happened for me. And I went to my coach and I'm telling him about this new opportunity. And I think the timing is right. It has to happen now. It's not going to be another opportunity like this. And he said, absolutely not. Do not touch that. Do not look at it. The only reason you think this is a good opportunity is because you're stuck. And I wasn't really happy to hear that, but he was right. And the way he said it to me is, if you do this right now, this is like being in a dating relationship, and you break up, and then you go date someone else, and the same issue arises. You break up again. No, you got to work through it. Otherwise, the same issue is going to arise in every business you ever had. You're going to get to the same point. And so I took that feedback and ended up doing 2.5 times what we'd done the year before, broke through those things, and then realized, because he said, if you do this, then you can go start this other thing you want to start. Well, suddenly I lost interest in that other thing. It wasn't as attractive anymore.
Fascinating. Which the shiny object syndrome.
Yes.
The grass is always greener. Yeah, it's always. There's a point of like romantic comedies always start where the relationship is going bad, and then it's always showing the romantic honeymoon phase. But everything kind of not dwindles, but you learn, you grow, and you got to realize like, well, I'm changing as well, and maybe my interests are, and what I find to be valuable. You might be at the stage where, yeah, I want to make a lot of money. That's dope. Well, then it might turn into, I'm bored with this money, or no amount of money is worth how much maybe I'm working or things I'm missing out on. And then maybe your focus turns to service and giving back and growing your team. And that's a never ending thing. It's like, I always have somebody to serve, my clients, my employees, everyone around me. It's pretty, I don't know, latching onto that has been a nice thing. There's always someone to help. And it's a good feeling to do that.
Well said. Absolutely.
Well, man, Karen, you're freaking amazing. I cannot thank you enough for coming on today. This is awesome chat. I feel like we're scratching the surface. We could, we touched on some good stuff.
Time.
Yeah. I mean, we talked business strategy, mindset, leadership and management, all kinds of things. So, cool. Well, I'll let you go. I know you got got something. I'll follow up with you. I'm trying to get all this like packaged well, so I'm actively working on it. So it might be a few weeks, but I'll send you some like video clips to use, or if you want to use them, and then like, hey, and then like the full thing. So
Totally.
yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks again.
Yeah. No, thanks for asking me to be on here. I could, yeah, we could chat for days.